right, people, we back. Victory and Vices podcast. Me, Rory Spooner. We're live in full effect. Reece Henley back again to do his thing. You know what it is. Apologies we weren't here last week. Scheduling conflicts meant we couldn't do the podcast. As you can see, there's no James Veck with us today. He will be back next week, hopefully, upon further assessment. He's not banned. He hasn't done anything wrong. No classic Veck. He's all good. He's fine. He's just off grafting, doing what he should be doing and not what he shouldn't be doing during these times. So, moving forward, Reece. We had a little chat earlier about, obviously, the season, how it's evolved, and trying to come up with some topics today, to discuss with the general public and amongst ourselves. So we've had a little bit of time now to assess the league, the players, who's doing what. It's kind of this pathway is developing now as to sort of who's going to be pushing for the league, who's not, who's going to be relegated, who's not, who might be, a golden boot, who's not. So one of the questions you asked me earlier, which was a really good one, and it was a question I kind of asked myself the other day, was, can Spurs win the league? Now, I wanted your take on it, seeing as you asked me the question, because it is a very interesting question. And a lot of people at the start of the season would have said, no, they can't. But what is your take on it? Do you reckon they can do some damage this season?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, they've had a good start to the season, and we know how important momentum is. I think I've kind of flip-flopped with my perception or the answer to that question over the last few weeks. I think certainly the start they made, I thought they don't look great, and then I think they put 6 past Southampton, and I started to think, actually there's a bit of shape to Spurs. They've got Harry Kane firing earlier on in the season, which is not something they've really had in previous seasons. They've had to wait a couple of months for Harry Kane to really warm up, by which time they're not really in the picture. Yeah. They've got Son and Kane firing, for them really well. They've looked sturdy in defence. They haven't looked awful. But when they shipped 3 goals to West Ham within a matter of minutes, I thought, do you know what? There's just not that mentality in the Spurs team to see through, a game, let alone, a title, winning season. That being said, having watched them since, they do look very good. I can't look at any one part of their team and say that there's not enough quality to mount a title challenge. I think they've got one of the better defenses in the league. They've certainly got a keeper who, is one of, if not the best keeper in the league, as well as, a world class, possibly the best in the world for front 3 in Kane, Son and Bale. So, in my opinion, I don't see any reason with a coach like Jose Mourinho why he can't turn that group of players into winners. We saw on the documentary on Amazon how many times Mourinho said, look, we're too nice. You're really good guys, but you are too nice. You need to be bastards. And
I like that.
I think we've seen with Kane, the penalty he won the weekend, it was a bit dirty, the way he won it. It was a bit ugly. And I think with Kane, especially this season, a lot of his performances, he's had the bit between his teeth. And with that Brighton win, I mean, if the Spurs of maybe last season or seasons gone by might have, just flopped to that draw. But, Gareth Bale was in there, fantastic player to bring off the bench, especially he's not fully fit yet. And they were able to get that goal and win the game, which is not 3 points that they would have taken before. With the question, can they win the league? Obviously, we need to look at the teams around them. And in all things being equal, Liverpool, in my opinion, would have won the league this year. Now, we know that Fabinho's injured. We know that Van Dijk's out till at least the new year. They've got other defenders there who are injured as well. So, and obviously then you've got coronavirus mixing things up. I mean, we've already seen 2 or 3 of their players go down with it over the course of this year, as well as Alisson having fitness issues. So that throws a spanner in the works. Man City look terrible and frail defensively. Sergio Aguero can't seem to keep fit for more than about 24 hours. So really, there's a spot there. There is an opportunity there for anyone to come and win the league this year. And if there were people out there talking about whether Everton could genuinely win the league, well, if Everton were in that conversation, then Spurs definitely are. And I see no reason why they can't win it.
Do you know what? I'm with you. I looked at that Spurs side the other day, and the West Ham result it seemed to be a freak result almost. Does that make sense? Like the way it happened, Lanzini's goal, he just pumped it, right? And 99 times out of 100, that goes into row Z. It doesn't go near the goal. But it went in, and I just remember I sat there thinking, well, that was a freak result. That won't happen again. A Mourinho team, they're going to come back, and they're going to bounce back, and they're going to show people what they're made of. And they are. You're right. They've got a bit of resilience about them. And it's interesting. Me and Becky were discussing it, I think, on the last podcast we did. And the team that gets it together first has the best chance of winning. And that could well be Spurs, because the first team to go on a run now where they go, let's say, the next 10 games, that's going to decide for me who wins the league, because there's too many inconsistencies. Manchester United are poor. Manchester City have been really poor. Liverpool, right now they're doing okay. They're getting by, but there will be tougher tests for them. There's a big one this weekend with City as well. So that Spurs team, I think they've got the minerals now. I do. And when I look at the team, I think that Spurs team is everything Mourinho wanted Manchester United to be. There's not a lot of superstars. In fact, there's probably only one superstar, which is Harry Kane. And Harry Kane is the consistent player you need to win a league. When you look at what Mourinho had at Manchester United, for example, your Martials, your Rashfords, people like that, they're good players, but they're not consistent. Harry Kane is in that bracket of a Sergio Aguero, a Robert Lewandowski, where no matter if he plays a team that's top of the league or the team that's bottom of the league, you're getting the same performance, you're getting the same goals. You don't get that with Martial and Rashford. And Mourinho's built this side that is it's just a real workman-like side. You look at, Højbjerg, you look at Doherty, you look even Reguilon to a degree, he's got them all singing off the same hymn sheet. And West Ham result aside, they've been by far and away the most impressive team this season. I think they've got a really good shout.
Here's the thing about Spurs, and the question of can they win the league. This year we've seen, calendar year, we've seen, interrupted football schedules where footballers' bodies have been put through the mill with games, no games in 3 months, and then all of a sudden 6 games in 10 days. And, their bodies have been through an enormous amount that's, novel for them. And it has caused a lot of injuries. It has. And it wasn't such a factor at the end of last season. But the fact that there's 3 subs now and not 5, you can see players are picking up injuries. Factor in for, COVID-related illnesses and omissions because of that reason. And you start to look at teams' depth. You look at Liverpool, and they have been found out. They don't have a lot of depth. If you get rid of a left back or a right back, centre halves, defensive midfielder, there isn't really anyone that can take that place. With enough quality that you can say, okay, they can still challenge even if this player's out for the rest of the season. Not so with Spurs. If you take Kane out of that team, then Bale can come central and they've got Lucas Moura wide. If you take Serge Aurier out of that team, Matt Doherty comes in and is brilliant. Take Reguilon out the side, Ben Davis, he'll do a job. They've got a couple of reserve centre halves. In midfield, I think they've got 6, you say average centre midfielders, but certainly nobody is going to leave and completely leave the team in a hole. So there is a lot of depth there. Well, that's what Mourinho has done. He's added players to his squad in a multitude of different positions that can strengthen the overall squad. So they can win the league. There's no doubt about that. They have enough quality. They just need to bring it now into the big games. That's where they've struggled. They have struggled to beat your Liverpools, your Manchester Cities. They need to be able now to step up and say, okay, well, we're near the top of the league now. Are we going to stand up and be counted here and actually give this a go? Liverpool are nowhere at the moment. They are, they're doing well on points, but like you said, they're up shit creek with no paddle at the moment. And I would be really mightily impressed if they could sustain good form with the problems that they've got. And I personally back City to put 4 past them on the weekend. Man City, I don't think, whilst they're a quality squad and probably better than Tottenham on paper, they've got problems that they haven't worked out yet. If Tottenham are going to win a league title, it has to be this year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the inconsistencies of the season with COVID and various other things, and the fact that you're going to see all the top six teams, or the quote unquote top six teams, because I'm not entirely sure if Manchester United are a big side anymore, but the top six sides, they are all going to take points off of each other. And if Spurs can capitalise that and be the most consistent, they need a bit of luck. Look, Harry Kane, if you can keep him fit for an entire season, you've got a hell of a chance. Because whilst Bale can come in, I think, Kane is that guy. It's difficult to supplement the goals that he brings. And I think with Lloris as well, like you said, Lloris is a world-class goalkeeper on his day. And anything was to happen to Lloris, or even maybe one of the centre-halves. I mean, okay, Joe Rodon would come in. He's a very talented young boy, and I think he'll actually do well in the Premier League. But you're asking a lot to jump up from, what was effectively a mid-table championship side to someone who might be wanting to win the league. So, yeah, very interesting. I think they can do it. Reece thinks they can do it. Everybody at home, let us know. Spurs fans, do you think that you can win the league? Is it a realistic shout? If you're not a Spurs fan and you think your team has a shout, let us know as well, whether it's Everton, Aston Villa, Arsenal, Liverpool, anybody in between. But yeah, Spurs for the league. Interesting point, Reece. Very interesting. Touching upon Liverpool, just very quickly, because the last episode, me and Becky picked a few different players Liverpool could potentially sign. Not to necessarily just partner Virgil van Dijk, but to replace him when he's injured and add a bit of depth in there, because they are lacking that a little bit. Matip is okay. Gomez is, he's all right. He's, he hasn't really kicked on the way people thought he would. And, Fabinho, quality as he is better in midfield. So how do you think they've been coping thus far? I mean, they've kind of got out of jail a little bit with the firepower they got, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've coped. I mean, sometimes in a Football League season, you experience the adversity that Liverpool are experiencing. And to some extent, I have sympathy for the situation that Jurgen Klopp finds himself in. At the same time, they have an alarming lack of cover in that area, like I've just said. And so that poor level of planning has resulted in this extraordinary circumstance being a real issue for them, and having to promote players from the academy and things like that. Look, they've done okay so far, and they've picked up points and things like that. But I guess on the weekend, that'll be the big test. Can they carry this through? Because if they lose 3 of the next 6 games, let's say, which is entirely possible with a makeshift defence, and I don't think anyone would, criticise them for losing those games. If they were to lose 3 of those 6 games, then they could quickly find themselves adrift from the pack, and then you're playing catch up, and that is not so easy. That is not easy. So they're doing okay at the moment. It's about what we predict them to do in the future. And you can talk about replacements, you can talk about what they can do in the future, but this is the situation they are in now. And they have 2 months until the window. So it's not about who they can get in the future, but realistically, it's how they can stop the bleeding now.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, they're quite lucky. The signing of Jota has been pretty. It was a pretty inspired signing. He's such a quality player, and he adds so much to that Liverpool squad. And when you look at that sort of front three of Jota, Sadio Mane, and Salah, if they can keep the 3 of them fit, then they have a hell of a chance at doing something special again this season, because those goals that they bring will get them out of jail time and time again. But you're right there, Riso. The big games, the key ones like the Man City ones, they're kind of the games where you can't really get away with having a makeshift defence. You need specialist players in specialist positions. Just going back to what me and Becky said the other day. So obviously, me and Becky went through just like a list of different centre halves that we thought might be applicable to Liverpool. So we mentioned, I think it was Ben White, Soyuncu. We said Koulibaly to a degree, Jimenez at Atletico Madrid. There was one other one as well, Upamecano. Obviously, if you were to pick one and you think to yourself, okay, that would be a good choice for Liverpool, who do you think would be a good choice?
Well, of course, the names you've mentioned, of course, are all good picks. Do I think that Soyuncu is a mega replacement? Would I have him in the same team as Van Dijk? I'm not sure. Upamecano has just signed a new 5-year contract, so
trying to get him away from Leipzig anytime soon is going to be tricky. I'm a long-time admirer of Jimenez.
Yeah.
I think if you were to look pragmatically at it, you might look at De Ligt as the Dutch connection.
Okay.
I think Ake, again, you're not going to be able to prize him from City now. Diego Carlos at Seville.
Yeah.
At Sevilla, he's a good prospect. They have a problem because anyone they sign is going to need to be someone who can play alongside Van Dijk, but also it needs to be somebody who is a Van Dijk replacement, because with an ACL injury such as the one Van Dijk has picked up, as mega as he's been, he is human, and he may lose that yard of pace. Mm. He may lose that ability to be as mega as he has been. So anyone that they would sign in January would have to be someone who's a ready-made replacement, as well as someone who can complement him. And that is an extremely difficult signing to make.
It's a big ask. Yeah, it's a big ask. Yeah, interesting you mentioned, obviously, Van Dijk with the ACL there, because he, I didn't realise, until I sort of did a quick Google search the other day, that Van Dijk is 30 now. I could have sworn he was about 25, 26 for some reason. And that's not an easy injury to come back at any age, let alone 30, where father time is going to start to catch up with him pretty quickly. So Yeah, exactly. Hey, look. I mean, here's your example. So yeah, it's not easy going. So that will be very interesting to keep an eye on, because that is I didn't expect a pivotal moment in this season to evolve that quickly. But the footballing gods thought, you know what, it's 2020. What else can we do?
Well, we had a discussion. I mean, we're going back here. I mean, you'd have to scroll back up, on the videos for quite a while. But this is going back to the season where Man City Centurions won the title.
Yeah.
I remember that we had a discussion, can Liverpool win the league? And one thing that we said was, well, can they keep Van Dijk fit? Because he is the most key part of their title run, in my opinion, because he's the person that single-handedly changed the club the most. And in this case, they haven't. And they would be lucky to get him back before February. And
I don't think they will.
Even if they were to get him back, then rushing him back could be even worse. So they're really going to struggle. Really going to struggle.
Interesting times. Yeah, Liverpool fans, again, let us know obviously your opinions, and we'll engage with you in the comments below. Going back to signings, one of the best signings, potentially the best summer signing thus far, is Thomas Partey. The hype train really rolled into town with his performance against Manchester United's Diamond the other night. He was just utterly dominant. I mean, it was, I don't want to say it's one of the most complete performances I've ever seen, because I remember watching Xavi against England in the Bernabeu, and Xavi produced probably the best midfield display I've ever seen. It was just ridiculous. But Partey was excellent. With him, Reece, I mean, obviously, the way he's kind of transformed that Arsenal midfield, what's your take on him? Do you think the next Patrick Vieira tag is justifiable, or is it a little too soon?
I've been a long time admirer of Thomas Partey. I've watched him a lot at Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, and he has been very, very much mega in the midfield.
Yeah,
and I did say on the podcast I thought this was a perfect signing. He's slotted in really well, and the performances he's put in are brilliant. But let's get some perspective for a moment. He's played some farmers from Ireland in the Europa League.
Yeah. And
he's played possibly the worst ever Manchester United team in the league. And to be honest, he was very good, but the level of people he was playing against allowed him to be that good. I did see him give the ball away a few times against Manchester United in sloppy areas. So he's not been world class, but he's been very good, and he's plugged gaps in Arsenal's team. But I don't want to discredit the other players on that side who are well drilled, and they were well drilled before Partey arrived.
Yeah.
Arteta has created a really good defensive shape at Arsenal, something that I wouldn't have personally predicted.
So he very much comes into a side which are already quite sturdy, with the intention of, solidifying that midfield. And then he can also play, which allows the Arsenal to get out. Tierney likes to go forward, Bellerin likes to go forward, and that means that Partey can then tuck in wherever he needs to tuck in and do what he needs to do. So yeah, he's been very good. But to compare him to Patrick Vieira after those two games against Manchester United and Dundalk, I think that is strong. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
In 15 years since Patrick Vieira left the Invincibles, we haven't seen anyone of that mould who's gone near him. Yaya Toure, perhaps, who was a bit more advanced.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anyone really that gets near Patrick Vieira in that sense. And so after two games, to say that Partey is, going to be the next Vieira, it's everything that we do. For example, Mason Greenwood. He bursts onto the scene. He's going to be, the next Cristiano Ronaldo. No, he's not, of course. We build people up too much. I think the best thing for Arsenal fans to do is just to let Partey do his thing. Let Partey be Partey. Don't make Partey be Vieira, because then he will fail.
Yeah. Just out of, just to go off topic slightly, Mason Greenwood's never been the same since he had that threesome in Iceland with Phil Foden and that girl. So shout out to Mason Greenwood and Phil Foden. Phil Foden's actually gone on and he's kicked on, and that threesome has done wonders for his career so far. He's really kicked on, but Greenwood is just not performing. I know he scored a good goal the other day, but yeah, it's Greenwood needs to pull his finger on his
It's like anything. I mean, you apply that logic to any young English player. I think Phil Foden had that hype about him about a year before he even started playing for Manchester City. So he had all that time to kind of people get used to him. And now they don't talk about him so much as a young player, more as they do just a regular part of Man City's squad. Whereas Mason Greenwood, very much, he's what Man United have pinned their hopes on as a centre forward. And well, let's be honest, he's decent and he's got a good run of, a good turn of pace. But do I see him ever being in the Kane mould? No.
Yeah, they're big shoes to fill, the Harry Kane mould. Yeah. Going back to Partey as well, just obviously mention him very quickly. I'm kind of with you a little bit. I think he's more like a Michael Essien than he is a Patrick Vieira. That's who he reminds me of. He gets forward very well. Defensively, he's very solid. What I will say about that Arsenal performance is, as good as Arsenal were, because they were really good, and as bad as United were, if it wasn't for Paul Pogba's mistake, we'd be talking about another drab 0-0. And realistically, we'd be looking at it thinking, well, Arsenal didn't actually create that much in fairness. I mean, they had the odd chance here or there, but, they were solid. They had a great shape about them. They pressed from the front so good. I remember when Matt Smith came on, shameless plug, if you want to go see our Matt Smith interview, please feel free to do so. But when Matt Smith came on and he talked about Arteta as a coach, and we said to him, do you think he'll do well at Arsenal? And he said, yeah, I think he'll do great. Yeah, he's a great coach. And I remember thinking, okay, that's interesting. We've got a first-hand account of someone working with him and seeing him day in, day out. And he could have said, I'm not sure about it. And he didn't even say it in a PC way where he was doing it because he's worked with him and he didn't want to sort of rock the boat. He just went, yeah, he's a good coach. Yeah, he'll do well. So from that point onwards, I kind of had an understanding where I thought, okay, let's see what he brings in. What's he going to bring to the table? And he's found this formation that suits him incredibly well, the 3-4-3. The back four, I feel like United didn't really expose, which we'll segue into nicely now, because we mentioned Partey. So we'll talk about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Now, I know, for me as a United fan, this is a difficult discussion, and you love rubbing it in, so we may as well get to it. United never fully exposed Arsenal's weaknesses. I felt like United, very much like the Chelsea game, they played with the handbrake on for some bizarre reason. Like, it was just, Arsenal played with a back four, which they don't kind of traditionally do now. And, Holding and Gabriel, they did okay, right? But Gabriel, they made him look like a prime Thiago Silva. I don't think he's that. I think he's a good player. And I think, Tierney and Bellerin are good fullbacks, but, you could easily expose them as better teams will. So what was your take on the Solskjaer performances this season thus far, Reece, in terms of what he's done tactically and sort of how he's managed that United side?
Yeah, I think with the United performances this season, what you would say is it's shocking that Ole doesn't appear to know his best 11 after 2 years in the job. He doesn't know what players can give him consistent performances, and to my knowledge, or to my eye, it appears like he's picking players like he'd be picking them on a video game. He's just sticking people into positions with not a lot of thought about how those players are going to play in those positions. I think what you said about Pogba is a very interesting point. I think United fans like to view him as this, terrible character who's toxic and is ruining their club. But when you bring a player like Paul Pogba into your team, you're essentially, you're buying a Ferrari. The last thing you want to be doing is driving it at 30 mile an hour around town. So with Pogba, I think, and I have always thought that his best position is, around about the 10 position. I think that his best performances for Manchester United have been when he doesn't have the shackles on him defensively, nor, and he's able to go forward and influence play moving forward, especially on the turnover of possession. And I still think that Pogba is one of the best players in the side. He's just being managed incorrectly. He's been played essentially in positions where he's being asked to do jobs that he doesn't want to do. And some people would sit there and say, well, okay, he kind of suits a deep lying playmaker role. And that's fine if you're playing Newcastle at home, who are going to sit behind the ball all day. When you're playing a side like Arsenal, who are going to come and attack you, then a player like Paul Pogba is going to be sitting outside of his own box, exposed defensively. And he, for the large portion of the game, had Fred next to him. And he has, for all season, had Fred or McTominay next to him. And these players aren't good enough to help him defensively. I say Matic is okay. He does the job. But again, not world class, not good enough. This all goes back to how United are bad defensively. Aaron Wan-Bissaka can't go forward. So whatever you get from him, you need someone else to help come forward. Harry Maguire, shocking defensively. Not good leadership. So the shape is bad. Lindelof, not great. And I guess we're yet to see what happens to Alex Telles. I actually think he'll be a decent addition to the squad when he can come in. But there's a huge gap between your defence and your midfield in terms of how you can get the ball into your midfield, and then the gap between the midfield and the attack, including Fernandes as part of that. So Ole, it's like Roy Keane said, his players are going to get him sacked, and eventually they will. Because last season, they went on a run where they could have 5 subs in a game, and for whatever reason, it suited Manchester United more than it did all the other sides, and they managed to put a run together and they got in the Champions League. But let's be honest, that was luck, because they were shambolic pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And had it not been for the COVID pandemic, they wouldn't have qualified for the Champions League, and we could be talking about a different manager being at Man United right now. Which brings us on, I guess, to the question of, if not Ole, then who? And would Pochettino be good at Manchester United? We've had this discussion before. I don't think so. I just don't believe that Pochettino would bring the mentality that would be needed at Manchester United, because they need an overhaul there. They need someone to come in and just say, right, okay, there's 7 players in this squad who aren't good enough. Let's get rid of Lindelof. I don't care how much Maguire costs. Let's get rid of him. Luke Shaw, you know what? We spent loads of money on him when he was 18. It didn't work. Let's get rid. Just wield the axe. McTominay, yeah, he's good. All the fans like him, but he's not good enough. Let's get rid of him. Fred, we paid £60 million for him, and he sells loads of shirts out in Ukraine, but you know what? He's crap. So they need to bring someone in who's not afraid to say those sort of things.
Yeah.
And get the right people in. And I don't know if Pochettino would be the right guy. For me, I would have to be somebody who can bring a whole new brand of football, someone who has a recognisable style of play. Maybe Brendan Rodgers or Luis Enrique. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to get Pep Guardiola from City, but somebody who's got that kind of creative style of play, who can teach players who appear to have forgotten how to play football.
Yeah, interesting. Just to unpack what you said a little bit, I think Paul Pogba, for all of his qualities, lets himself down badly. And what I mean by that is Paul Pogba has played in a midfield two. The same way he plays there for France in a midfield two as a deep line playmaker, he hasn't shown up. Paul Pogba on the weekend played left of a midfield three. So he was on the sort of left of the diamond. He played there week in, week out for Juventus, knows the position well, didn't show up. Paul Pogba's played in a midfield three. He's played in a midfield two. There's times he's played as a 10. He's played all over the park for Manchester United. And I can count on one hand the number of times he's been man of the match. I remember there was a game against Everton away where he was outstanding and he dominated. And there was a game against obviously Man City in the derby where they won 3-2, and he dominated the second half and he was superb. But Paul Pogba, for someone who is the biggest, the reason Paul Pogba gets the most criticism, and some people, right, they put it down to race. They say it's because he's black. It's not because Paul Pogba is black. Paul Pogba is a £100 million player. He's Manchester United's most expensive signing ever. I'm pretty sure he is their top earner, and he just doesn't show up enough. And I'm out of excuses for Pogba now. And I think with Pogba's contract situation, his contract is coming into the final 2 years this summer, which is stick or twist, where basically a club goes, okay, we either give you a brand new contract and we keep you here for another 5 years, or what we will do, we'll sell you for the maximum amount. Because if United let it go down to 1 year, all of a sudden, Pogba holds all the aces, and they're not going to want that. I don't think he wants to be there. So for me, I think United need to get rid of him next summer. I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer hasn't got the balls to drop him. The issue you say about, obviously, Fred and Shaw, you're completely right, Reece. A lot of these players aren't good enough. But the problem is not Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Mourinho came in and he threw his weight around and they said, you know what? Exits on your left, we don't want to know. They give, bear in mind now, they give Phil Jones, Marcus Rowe, Chris Moore, all these guys new contracts because it's easier to sign a player to a new contract than it is to go and buy a new player. And that's the problem with Manchester United. It's the owners. No matter who comes in, we're going to have the same process. I said, and I'm not going to hold my hands up, it's on video, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is a substitute teacher. And I firmly believe he is a substitute teacher. I don't think a man with his resume would get this job anywhere else in the world. And I think when he leaves Manchester United, he'll only ever work in mid-table clubs again. I don't think another top club's ever going to take him. Has he done well? Yes. Does he deserve to be sacked? Debatable. I don't know. But I don't think Pochettino's the answer. Somebody mentioned Allegri the other day. They said, how do you solve a problem like Paul Pogba? Well, go and get the manager that basically played him in the position he liked and got the best out of him. So could somebody like an Allegri come in? Maybe.
Well, look at it like this. With Manchester United, they have a squad full of players who, over time, the squad has become worse and they have tried to plug gaps, but it hasn't worked with certain players. And certain players have been promoted to the academy and done well. But we look at their three best signings. We look at their three more expensive signings in Bruno Fernandes, Paul Pogba and Donny van de Beek. And these three players play in the exact same position. And Ole Solskjaer all of a sudden is left with just a nightmare trying to get them all to play together or figuring out when to play one, not the other. Why couldn't they have just stuck with Paul Pogba? I know people say about, Fernandes coming in and doing well, but to my eye, he hasn't done that well in his performances this season. Why couldn't they have just stuck with Paul Pogba and invested £80 million again in their defence? Okay, Maguire, I said at the time, not good enough. The recruitment's been poor, and Ole has to hold his hands up and say, no matter how much the fans want to blame Woodward, there's no way that Ole Solskjaer doesn't have an input into who gets signed. Their recruitment is rotten. They need a new man who with a brand of play that he can bring to the club, but it won't be enough. He'll also have to take on the board. He'll have to say, look, these are the guys I want, back me. And they'll have to back him. And if they don't want to back him, then that's a whole other problem.
Yeah. I read an interesting piece in The Athletic a while back. It was about United's recruitment recently. It's very interesting, actually. It said that United's net spend is not allowed to go over 40 million due to the debt they have. So no matter who comes in now, the hands are going to be tied a little bit because United's net spend, I don't think, can be that high. So their recruitment, I mean, look, me and Becky have discussed this so many times. It's beyond bad. Like it's so poor. And we keep banging the same drum. United aren't going to do anything until the Glazers are gone, until Woodward is gone, at which point then you can fully move forward. But they're not
Glazers.
What's wrong with the Glazers? How do you mean?
I think they put nearly £1 billion into transfers since Ferguson left.
Yeah, but they've also taken $1 billion out as well.
Yeah, but they've invested $1 billion into the team. What do you care how the books are balanced?
Well, ultimately, Manchester United now are 600 million in debt, so that's obviously going to hinder. If you've got massive debt repayments, right? Bear in mind, they haven't. Old Trafford is an old stadium as well. That needs to be upgraded massively. Like, they need a new stadium, they need a new playing squad. If you take $1 billion out of a club and you consistently turn around and skimp and go, oh, by the way, we don't want to do that, or we don't want to do this. Realistically, we talk about United spending. They should be spending an awful lot more given the money they've got coming in.
Well, I think if you rewind to last year, mate, and they spent like £150 million in one window. What's interesting, I think, is you look at when Mourinho was there, and the performances were poor despite limited investment. You'd have to say that it was Mourinho's fault. That was the consensus, that it was Mourinho's fault. And all of a sudden now, Ole comes in, and he wins a few games at the start of his career. He beats PSG away, and all of a sudden it's the Glazers' fault. It's Woodward's fault, and I think it's awful convenient that just because they've got a ex-player managing them, suddenly they need to find someone else to blame. And yeah, their recruitment's not been great, and someone's got to be held responsible. One of those people is Woodward. The Glazers are bankrolling it, and I'm sorry, I don't care how much the fans will tell me they care about whether their stadium gets a new roof or their academy gets new facilities. Ultimately, they want money invested in their team. That's what the Glazers are doing at the moment, and there are a lot of clubs in a lot of worse position. Arsenal have had almost no money invested into them over the last few years, but they've recruited correctly, and they beat you the other day. And their owners have put a significantly less money into them. So look a bit closer to home.
I think it's a combination of everything, to be honest with you. You can look at the Arsenal owners and say, yeah, they haven't put any money in. But at the same time, the Manchester United owners, time after time, they've blocked transfer after transfer. The perfect example now, you mentioned Jose Mourinho and obviously, his tenure at United. If Jose Mourinho wins the league at Spurs, was he right all along? So can we then look at players like Pogba and Martial and Luke Shaw and turn around and go, well, Jose was right because he signed Højbjerg and Doherty and he's won the league. What he's got there is workman-like players that will follow his instructions to a T. Players like Martial and Shaw and Pogba, they didn't want to know. So if Mourinho then wins the league, is he right about those players?
I think when he was at Manchester United, they have had a policy, and I think to a certain extent they still have the policy, where they don't like to sign players of a certain age. I think Mourinho badly needed a centre-half, and they give him Bai, who isn't good enough. If they'd have invested money into a really good centre-half who he could have used, then they may have been in business, but they gave him Matic, who at the time who was good enough. They gave him Pogba, who at the time was a world beater. They give him Lukaku, who was mismanaged at Manchester United and has shown since leaving that it wasn't him that was the problem. I think if you got rid of Pogba, you'd see the same. So there are problems at Manchester United, and some of them are Ole, some of them are the players, some of them are the board, and some of them are the owners. But for United fans to hide behind Ole in and say, this guy is good enough, he isn't.
and he's just one of the problems.
Yeah, I will look. I don't think it's all. I'm not all in or all out. As far as I'm concerned, the fact that you can't pinpoint one particular problem or root cause tells me that there's too many issues at that club and they're not moving forward anytime soon. So we'll draw a line under United. Obviously, the United
just before you do, mate, it will be worth saying. United fans are, they're rightfully acting like the sky is falling at the moment and that everything's going against them. And on current form, yeah, they're not doing anything this season. They hammered Newcastle, which was it didn't really reflect much because Newcastle try not to play big teams. They sit and they put the men behind the ball, which not a lot of teams will do against Manchester United this year. To be fair, so they're going to have more games in their hands. But to sort of shine a bit of light on this, you look at the league at the moment. And you've got Liverpool top on 16 points, and then down to Spurs in third, who are on 14 points, which leaves one more spot for the Champions League. Realistically, Everton, Southampton and Wolves aren't going to get that spot. So we look at Chelsea with the next contender on 12 points. Man United are 5 points behind them. And so as much as things seem hard now and things seem unlikely now, they are only 5 points against behind their main Champions League qualification rival. There's almost no Manchester United fans out there who genuinely believe that they were going to win the title this year. But you do want to get the Champions League, and that's what you need to do. And you're 5 points off it essentially. So yes, things aren't positive at the moment, but you're close enough to put some, plasters over these, cuts essentially, and sort it out.
Yeah, it's been a tough start for United. I'll be the first to admit that, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, when you're a top club, you've got to navigate those periods well. And okay, they did well in the Champions League. They've done quite well against PSG and Leipzig. They battered them, and like you said, they did okay against Newcastle. But yeah, they've been left exposed a little bit at home in the Premier League. So I suppose time will reveal all. Like you said, they're not far away, but 5 points can very quickly become 15 points. So let's see how it goes. But yeah, interesting times indeed. I like how the season's evolving. It's very interesting. It's not all one-way traffic, and I'm sure as the year ends, we'll see a few more debatable topics that you can dig your teeth into. So, all right. So going back to an ex-United legend very quickly, because we weren't really sure how to approach this topic, given it came out yesterday and it's a little sensitive. But that's what we do, we handle shit well. Ryan Giggs, now, he allegedly beat up his girlfriend, partner, Bay. I don't know how she likes to be addressed. But allegedly, now the key word is allegedly, he's come out and denied it. He stepped down temporarily from managing Wales for the next couple of games. Why, I don't know. I mean, realistically, if he's done nothing wrong, God bless, just keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, look, I don't know where this goes from here. As a football podcast based in Wales, we always want the Welsh national team to do well. Every time I think they've turned a corner, something pulls them back a little bit, and I just think, oh, for God's sake, really? Like, really? You've got this great group of young players, and you've got this manager Giggs, who was, a wonderful ex-professional, but now his personal life is getting in the way. So I know there's not an awful lot we can really say to discuss about it, because a lot of it is very much ongoing. It's an open case, so to speak. But what is your take on the situation itself, Reece, in terms of what we know thus far?
Yeah, it's very concerning. I think, like you said, at this stage, we don't know much other than what the papers have suggested has gone on, and we can't know if there's any fact in it. All we know is that the police have got involved, and they wouldn't have done that lightly, especially for someone as high profile as Ryan Giggs.
Yeah.
There's no smoke without fire. Something has gone on, and at the moment, the relevant people are getting to the bottom of exactly what has gone on. And if Giggs has been found to be done something wrong, then then he will be dealt with appropriately. We know that Ryan Giggs is a terrible human being at the end of the day. I don't think there's too many people out there who disagree with me.
to have sex with your brother's wife is shocking behaviour, really, on any level. It doesn't matter.
Unless your brother's okay with it, at which point then, I mean, look,
and these relationships do exist, but
yeah, they do exist.
No, that was one of them. But what I'm saying is that, you know, he's done bad things in the past. Is he going to? Yeah, is this thing real? Has he done it? It's possible. Okay, it's not like, you know, he's a saint who this has come out of nowhere for. The question is, if what the papers are saying are true, and he gets convicted of what he's done, then the FA of Wales will almost certainly move, having already postponed his press conference and told him that he won't take charge of the 3 games that Wales have to play in November. They will almost certainly move to dismiss him from his job, and that will probably affect his career moving forward as well. The problem comes not from Giggs' sacking. Now, Giggs has made Wales, I wouldn't say a force, because their football hasn't been tremendous. It certainly has lacked the expression that they've had in previous years, but he's made them extremely hard to beat. I think they've gone 7 or 8 games without conceding a goal, which for Wales is extraordinary, especially when you factor in the fact that 8 games has come after phasing out Ashley Williams, who was their captain for about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And so that is, in my book, that's a huge achievement for Ryan Giggs, and one he should be incredibly proud of. My concern would be what would happen to them if he left, and that specifically. The problem is the FAW, the FA of Wales, they always look to go for the cheapest option. Fair enough, they don't have a monumental income stream that the FA of England do, and so they have to budget in certain ways. And one way that they try and do that is through their recruitment process. Now, we were all big fans of Gary Speed, but he was the cheap option. He barely had a managerial role before, and they went for him. Chris Coleman, he was a cheap option, a former player. They went for him, did well. Ryan Giggs, former player, cheap option. It's gone well, and so they will look to do the same thing. And I'm calling it now. If Ryan Giggs does get dismissed, and I do think that he will be dismissed, it'll be Craig Bellamy, and that concerns me. That really concerns me, because he hasn't had a role in management, and he's a hothead. He can be divisive, and that camp is so united. I would be concerned that if there's a problem, you wouldn't want to divide a camp like Wales. It would be like dividing the Leicester title winning team. It's that spirit that makes them successful.
Yeah.
So that it concerns me.
Yeah, interesting. Do you know what? You're right about Giggs being the cheap option. And I'm thinking to myself, given 2020's strange behaviour and the lack of funds available to the Welsh FA, would they maybe turn a blind eye and go, okay, look, he made a mistake, but he's human. Do we keep him on? Or is that completely untenable, that position?
I think that if it had been the case where he had stolen something, or if he had been drink driving or something along those lines, then I think, it would have been possible to have said, okay, we'll turn a blind eye to this, give Giggsy a slap on the wrist and say he's got to do X amount of community service, But if this is to be believed and he has, committed actual bodily harm on a woman, that's a hot button issue,
it is.
Domestic violence. And violence against women, especially, because of course it's a serious crime, but society is really waking up to it, and it's a very much a zero tolerance thing. For example, if he had said a racist slur, they would have taken that more seriously than if he'd have, like I said, written off a car or been drink driving and put people in danger.
Yeah.
So it's about what he's done and to who. And I think that the FAW pushing the female game like they have been doing would be sending out a bad message if they allowed a woman abuser, a wife beater, to manage the team. But again, let's reiterate, we don't know what's happened for sure.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that. So let me throw a spanner in the works, right? Not to go too to be too controversial. But let's say Ryan Giggs hit this woman, but he did it in self-defense because she hit him first. All of a sudden, are we in a position where Wales can afford to let Ryan Giggs go? Because there's no one to replace him.
It's like we said, on a footballing point of view, they need to keep him at all costs. But it's all about image nowadays. Things depend on how things have developed. I think that there will be portions of society who, even if he has acted in self-defense against his girlfriend, there will be portions of society that will say that it's still not acceptable. One thing that the FAW don't need is a manager who is so divisive. Like we keep saying, we don't know what's happened. There's a multitude of things that could have happened, all ranging from absolutely nothing happening to it being completely accidental, or it being a full-on assault. So let's work out what's happened. Let the authorities deal with it, and if he's convicted, then the FAW need to make a decision. And I don't think that decision will fall in Giggs's way.
Yeah, tough road for Giggsy. He's navigated difficult times before, but this one is a little different. So
I think Rodri Giggs might be getting a little bit more work from Paddy Power at the moment.
Look, Rodri Giggs, he cracked open the Prosecco when he saw that news. He was like, finally, the public expose. He is now the favourite Giggs brother. Well, I think he might have been for most people for a while, but yeah, it's interesting news. It's not news that I necessarily expected. I don't think any of us expected it, to be honest with you. But we'll see. We'll keep you posted on developments. Moving on to our new favorite thing at this podcast, FPL. Oh yes. Now I'm fully involved. Reese is fully involved. James Veck, not sure, slipping down the league. Now, FPL. This is an interesting one because we've been discussing this before we came on. I don't know who this lad's name was, Chioto, I can't pronounce his name. He's disappeared from our league. So we know it's open season in our league now because the top person, Johnny Roberts, shout out to Johnny, he is on 434 points. I am in 9th on 397. Reese is in 10th with 396. Becky is 18th with 369. All it takes is a couple of good weeks and you're back on top. And remember, the winner gets to come on the podcast with us. Huge incentive for any man, woman, or person, depending on how you like to identify. So, yeah, FPL, Reese. Obviously, you played your wild card. Explain to people what the wild card is and how that kind of messed up for you this week.
So the wild card essentially is a method of making unlimited transfers without incurring a penalty. I played my wild card, and I kept Tyrick Mitchell in just because I didn't know how to replace him. I left $1 million in the bank to use it down the line. He picked up a further knock, wasn't fit for Palace, and I think now will be displaced by Patrick Van Aanholt. So lots of people out there who will have him. Probably time to start thinking about taking him out. I also put Pulisic in, who got injured in the warm-up for Chelsea.
Nightmare. As soon as I saw that,
it is a freak occurrence in Fantasy League, but it does happen, and there is always a few unlucky people that it happens to. Just lucky that I didn't captain him. But Ings also took a knock, and you can get really unlucky in that sense. You got to move on. You got to dust yourself down, of course. I think now it is time to start considering the next few weeks. Spurs players over the last few weeks have had a good run of games, and I'm pretty sure anyone who's had Kane and Son in their team over the last few weeks have reaped the rewards. Like we mentioned on the podcast a few weeks ago, it was time to put them in. Now it's time to take them out. They've got to play. I think they've got to play Chelsea. They've got to play Man City.
They got a big fixture list coming.
They've got a few coming. So it is time to have a think about taking them out. It is time to start thinking about putting Chelsea players in. Chelsea have really, really good run of fixtures. So start thinking about your next few weeks. If you've got your wildcard in hand, don't play it. There's an international break coming up. People can get injured in international duty, so just wait and see. Sergio Aguero is expected back after the November internationals. So let's just wait and see what happens. Let's keep that wild card in play in case we need to get Gareth Bale in case he hits a good run, or Sergio Aguero if he hits the ground running with City. So let's just wait and see.
Yeah, interesting. I was looking at. I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. The Spurs game this weekend, I believe they have West Brom away, if I remember rightly. And West Brom, nobody have I don't think maybe only Burnley and West Brom. We'll call them equal for now. They're probably not, but they both conceded sort of the most amount of goals this season. So I was looking at it and thinking, wow, Harry Kane, triple captain. Before the international break, is he worth a shout? Could he bag a hat-trick against that West Brom side? And I think a lot of it depends on the side that Spurs put out on Thursday night. If there are any injuries, for example, Thursday night. So Harry Kane potential, I'm throwing it out there now, triple captain, you heard it here first. If he bags a hat-trick, I told you all. I have a decent standing in these leagues now. I feel like I can talk publicly about these things. So Kane is a potential triple captain, maybe. The wild card, and with Reece, I'm keeping in mind till after the international break, at which point I'll reanalyze things again. If you are looking for points defensively to give yourself a good base, looking at the fixture list this week, I would look at Chelsea defenders, I would look at West Ham defenders, I would look at Brighton defenders. Brighton are playing Burnley at home. I fully expect Brighton to get a win. Burnley have scored hardly anything. I think it's maybe 3 goals this season. So, your Websters, your Lamperties, people like that, pop them in. Very good value signings. If you are looking at adding a very good goalkeeper signing, I think Mendy at Chelsea was only 5 million when I checked this week. So they I fully expect them to get a clean sheet. I think they're playing Sheffield United. Sheffield United really struggling. Kurt Zouma is another good signing, very cost effective. Chilwell is another very good signing, so you could pop him in as well. Looking forward at that Chelsea side, again, a lot depends on what happens midweek. Hakim Ziyech just starting to find a bit of form. He's found his place in the Chelsea team. He'd be another very good signing if you're looking for someone going forward. In terms of the back four for West Ham, I think are playing Fulham at home. So if you are looking for any cheap signings, again, Cresswell and Fabianski would be my shouts moving forward. So defensively, give yourself that base, and you can then expand over the course of the team. So yeah, what do you reckon, Reece? Any transfers you got in mind in particular?
Look, for me, it's I've got to mend my team rather than amend it. I think the injuries that I've got, I'm going to wait and assess how they look after the Champions League week. I think Hakim Ziyech for Pulisic might be the sub that needs to happen for me, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah. I think the one I'm definitely going to go with is Fabianski for Rui Patricio. That's what I'm looking at this week. So I've only got the one free transfer myself this week, so I'm not going to make too many adjustments. But I'm going to try and give myself that defensive base to build upon, being that my midfield were very poor this week. FYI, I left Tierney on the bench. I left Harvey Barnes on the bench. Between them, they got 13 points. My 2 players that I had in their place only got 2, so I missed out on 11 points. And I'm still talking about it now because I've had sleepless nights about it. That's how much it's affected me. But yeah, those are the FPL shouts this week. Obviously, get in the comments below. Let us know your take on FPL, who you're picking, who you're not picking. Are you triple captain in this weekend? Let me and Reece know. Clearly, we need a little bit of help to get to the top of the league. But once we're there, we're not looking back. We're going to be dominating. So, Reece, anything else you want to bring up just before we go?
No, we're all good.
We are all good indeed. So make sure you subscribe, like the video. Obviously, add me and Reece up on the socials as well. If you want to get in touch with us, whether it's in the DMs on IG, you've got any questions for us, let us know. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, James Veck will be back with us again, schedule permitting. And we'll have all the news and views. So take care, people, and we will see you next time. Ciao.